Handsome Zach here, guys. I'm here to do a video to talk about my Mercenary Kruber builds and just general builds that we can do with Mercenary Kruber. Now, I won't be including any gameplay in this clip. I noticed that when I did the Unchained video, most of my audience's retention was solely based on the build itself and not so much the gameplay. So if you want to check out some gameplay from me and maybe even some of my friends, go ahead and do that. But let's just dive right into talking about builds and stuff like that. We're going to talk mostly about the kit, and then we'll get into weapons. And I will try to get into YouTube and timestamp the weapons section if you just want to talk weapons, or timestamp the ability section if you just want to talk abilities. So let's get cracking. So we're going to take a look at the base kit, what you start with at level 0. And that's to the right of the screen, guys. That's Pace Strikes. Hitting 3 enemies in one swing grants 10% increased attack speed for 6 seconds. Followed by Morale Boost, your ultimate. Marcus grants nearby allies 25% temporary HP and staggers nearby enemies. Those are both huge. Now we're going to move over to the perks. Attacks cleave through more enemies. Fantastic. So I think you kind of can guess where this is going. And no more laughing now. Increases crit chance by 5%, which is also really big when we're talking about cleaving into mixed hordes and stuff like that, for getting crits off and having a little bit more stagger and a little bit more armor damage, especially on weapons that aren't great with armor damage to begin with. Alright, so let's talk about level 5 abilities. You're going to have Drill Master over here to the left. I'm going to go left to right on all of these. Drill Master, damaging multiple enemies in one swing with a melee weapon, grants temporary health, max 5 enemies. This can actually proc on one enemy, like a monster or something like that that's big that you can cleave through. Not for like a whole boatload, but it's noticeable. If you take a look at it, you'll see it. Followed by Mercenary's Pride. Mercenary's Pride is melee killing blows, restore temporary health based on the health of the slain enemy. And Captain's Command, heal yourself with a first aid kit or healing draft, allows you to heal allies for 20% of their maximum health, clears any wounds. We're going to talk a little bit about these, and then I'm going to tell you in my order what I prioritize them as, and then we'll keep going. And if that takes too long, then I'll try to abridge it a little bit with the rest of these. Let's start in with Drill Master. Guys, your perk right there, attacks cleave through more enemies. It is so obviously synergizing with what the Mercenary has going on for him that Drill Master just seems like to be a hands down move. You're going to be cleaving enemies quite frequently. This is a horde game, so it's definitely a safe pick. Mercenary's Pride's a great pick too if you can down elites. Guys, elites are going to be your primary source of temp HP, because little slave rats that you're cleaving through and killing, they're not really going to give you anything, which can be supplemented with Morale Boost, because you are getting a 25% health buff with Morale Boost with for some temp HP. And if you want a little bit of scale, because they don't really discuss it at all, they just give you the green bar, the average character's health is around like 100 something. Like when I say 100 something, I mean like low 100, like 110, 120, 125. So that could be like a fourth of your health bar in temp HP. So Mercenary's Pride isn't a bad way to go to keep yourself going, and then wait till you find an elite. And when you get to harder difficulties, elites are going to be much more frequent, and especially when we're talking about things like deeds. Captain's Command, I almost wouldn't recommend this for anyone except for your bots, if I'm being frank. It can come in clutch once in a while, but you should be avoiding damage on your own and building temp HP on your own, typically. If you're in a really well-coordinated team, I bet something like this would work. All the characters have this ability with another name on it, same spirit, and it's just not it's just not great. Let's jump into level 10, more the merrier. Increase power by 5% for every nearby enemy and stacks it to 5 times. Well, that's big, guys, because we're going to be surrounded by enemies constantly, and that power buff includes damage, stagger, and cleave. It is just a straight up juice. And it makes you like I would say like a pocket god. Like when you are surrounded, you are at your absolute strongest, And with your bonus to cleave, you're just going to mow right through people. Speaking of cleave, let's talk about Limb Splitter. Increase cleave power by 50%. Well, that seems to obviously synergize well with what you have going on here. So that's fantastic too. Hellberg's Tutelage. Every 5 hits guarantees a critical strike. Critical strikes can no longer occur randomly. Okay. I can understand how this might sound good, especially to people who want to create like these really ultimate crit builds and stuff like that. But your character comes with an extra 5% chance to crit, so you're basically kind of removing something that's already in the package for the character by switching to Hellberg's Tutelage. I almost would never recommend it, and I almost would never recommend Limb Splitter anyway, just because more the merrier is a much more consistent and frequent bonus that it applies in all kinds of situations. Guys, it increases your power, which means it can help with range breakpoints. It can, I mean, like, it just does everything. Everything. Increased power is everything. Which brings me to level 15 perks. We've got Mainstay here, and I don't want to spend a whole lot of time on this, guys. I would love to break this down for you, but there's, like, spreadsheets and, like, math involved, and I'm not, like, a scientist. I just listen to players who are smarter than me and listen to what they have to say and go from there. Smiter seems to be the clear-cut winner in this one, and I would only guess that Smiter is because the first enemy hit always counts as staggered. You deal 20% more damage to staggered enemies, so now you're dealing 20% more on the first enemy hit. And then each hit against a staggered enemy adds another count of stagger. Bonus damage is increased to 40% against enemies afflicted by more than one stagger effect. So you are stacking up stagger and getting more damage. And the same could be kind of said for Mainstay, except that I think the reason why people like Royale with Cheese, who's a very popular guide maker for Vermintide and a fantastic player, if you ever get the chance to watch him, he has a YouTube. I think they recommend this because it's more in your hands, like your staggers and stuff like that, instead of hoping for 40% more damage to already staggered enemies. And I think it might be all around more applicable because some weapons don't come with great stagger power. And then finally, we're going to go into enhanced power. Guys, unless you're playing a ranged character or Sienna, enhanced power is almost never the right choice, it seems. It's just a 7% power buff, and a 7% power buff doesn't equal out to what even any of these two can offer you. And now I'm going to jump down to level 20, Reichland Reaper. Increase power by 15% when Pace Strike is active. Well, that has a lot of synergy with your kit because you are going to be hitting more than 3 enemies on one swing of a weapon if you're playing with the weapons I recommend later in the weapons section. So flat 15% power buff stacked with more the merrier, guys. That's 40% power increase. That's a huge chunk of power just to come up on real quick in the middle of a fight. And there are some times where you're surrounded, proccing more the merrier, and you're hitting a bunch of enemies where you really need to be hitting harder, staggering harder, cleaving more. Now we're going to follow that with enhanced training. Pace strikes increase attack speed by 20%. Now requires hitting 4 targets with a single attack to trigger. Absolutely fantastic. Faster attacks means more DPS. In my opinion, though, the 10% that's already guaranteed to me by 3 enemies, which is a lot easier to pull off consistently. The 10% is already pretty fast, and Reichland Reaper already gives me more damage to them anyway. So when I make my builds, I try to go for consistency as much as possible, and Reichland Reaper seems to have a beat on that. But I'm going to follow this by mentioning Strike Together. Guys, Strike Together is absolutely fantastic. Pace strikes spreads to nearby allies, giving them a 10% increased attack bonus for 6 seconds, as well as yourself. This is absolutely fantastic, especially if you play with bots, because now your Mercenary Kruber, let's say he's a bot, or you're playing with bots, your bots operate much better when they have higher attack speed because now they can find bigger openings, or find openings more frequently. That's a better way to put it, because they can attack faster. So anything you can do to increase your bot's attack speed is going to make them play better for you, and they're going to give you just a little bit better performance to their already kind of lackluster performance. But this is, I mean, no one on your team is going to say no to this 10% attack speed. No one's going to say no, and they'll probably even thank you for it. There's probably really not a bad pick in here, but if we're going to be playing to our own strengths and trying to just be a straight powerhouse for ourselves, and being a powerhouse for yourself can benefit your team quite a bit too, then the choice is Reichland Reaper, in my opinion, but none of these are bad. Now we're going to follow that with Stand Clear, increase dodge range by 20%. I cannot stress enough how much better it is to dodge in this game than it is to block. And having an increased dodge range on some weapons, like the Executioner's Greatsword, the Greatsword, and the Halberd, for instance, just like for an instance, is great. It'll allow you to easily dodge kite bosses, or bosses' monsters. It'll allow you to... I mean, just basically dodge. Yeah, what am I saying? Dodge. Which is fantastic. Blade Barrier. Reduce damage taken by 25% when Pay Strikes is active. Now, this is pretty juicy, guys, because you're going to be hit trading a little bit while you're inside of hordes. And it's natural. You're going to take a stray headbutt from a Beastman that's in the back of the pack that you really can't quite see yet, and you didn't cut through to see. So, Blade Barrier is going to help that temp HP go a little further, or help that green HP go a little further sometimes. Black Market Supplies. Let's talk Black Market Supplies real quick, guys, because I don't think there is a situation where you really need to run Black Market Supplies, ever. If you're going to be playing with a Blunderbuss build, and you're going to be trying to horde clear the Blunderbuss, I'm sorry, it sounds like a lot of fun, but you are so good at generating temp HP and dealing with these things with melee that the Blunderbuss doesn't really offer you anything in that situation, if that was a playstyle you were thinking of right away when you read that. And typically you're not going to be the special eliminator on your team playing as the Mercenary, so the extra ammo and ammo sustain won't be quite as important for you, unless for some reason you're carrying and you feel like you just want to one-shot everything at Cataclysm and keep moving. Then I might recommend Black Market Supplies, but you're going to be losing out quite a bit on some cool stuff to mitigate damage. And we're going to get down to the last ones. Level 30, you've got Walk It Off. Morale Boost also reduces damage taken by affected allies by 25% for 10 seconds. Now, this one had a bit of a nerf recently. It used to be like 40%, but 25%, we talked about Blade Barrier, is still pretty strong. And it's if you're using your ultimate frequently and you're not holding back, then that 25% extra damage mitigation, plus your 25 temporary health you're giving your team, and the staggers for nearby enemies to give everyone a little bit of breathing room, it's, I mean, like, what else can I say? It's going to be fantastic for everybody. And then we have Ready for Action, which is going to reduce the cooldown of Morale Boost by 20%, which means more temp HP, more staggers. And now if you ult and it wasn't like that great of a spot for it, like you kind of whiffed it, well, no big deal. It's going to come back a little faster. So it's pretty forgiving and pretty consistent, which is one thing I stress when I'm going through these builds. And speaking of consistency, let's talk about On Your Feet Mates. Morale Boost also revives knockdown allies. I see a lot of newer players when they get to level 30 with Mercenary run this because they think it's going to be the end-all, be-all, and it super is. Like, I can't stress enough how much it helped me when I was bridging the gap in skill between Champion and Legend. And On Your Feet Mates works in what seems to be, a cone. Now, we can see this radius around us from Morale Boost, but it will go through the floor, it will go through the ceiling, and that gives it a lot of flexibility. And there you go. If there was someone down below me, now they're up. But on the flip side of that, it seems to make players hold on to their ultimate, waiting for their friends to die, when realistically I would like to use either of these two abilities to make sure it never gets to that point in the first place. And that's all I've got to say on talents. Let's go right into weapons real quick. Keeping in mind that the Mercenary is kind of shoehorned into this cleaving machine and physical horde clear, you're going to want weapons that complement that. Obviously, the Executioner's Greatsword is a classic. It has been meta for as long as I've been playing, and I've only been playing for like a year now, so not as long as some people, but It's just been up there. You got that real easy light attack sweeps that do headshot damage, and it's really easy to line up headshots with this thing. You're like a lawnmower. Followed by these beautiful elite killing heavy attacks with your 5% crit bonus. The only downside is you don't have a whole lot of mobility with this weapon, and it doesn't pierce armor readily. You're going to have to go into a power attacks for that, and these power attacks, as you can see, leave you a little bit open for punishment. But it does synergize well with your character's abilities. I would like to talk to the Bretonian Greatsword a little bit, but I just don't think it's worth taking for this class. You've got a couple of lights that will cleave really well. You've got power attacks that if you angle right, it will cleave really well. But there's weapons that bring so much more to the table. Let's talk about the Greatsword real quick. The Greatsword had a buff recently where it's a little bit faster, and I think it does a tiny bit more armor damage, don't quote me on it, to armored enemies with your heavy. So what you're really going to want to do is go in for those light attacks and spam them to proc Swift Slaying, and then put them right through the grinder with those heavy attacks, guys. And as you can see, this weapon oozes cleave. It's cleaving's the only thing it does. Oh, and a nice little armor-breaking headshot right there that has a pretty significant chance to crit, it seems. I did a video just today on the Halberd and discussing the ways that it can definitely shake up the meta compared to the Executioner's Sword. It is armor-piercing. It's got these beautiful wide sweeps that you can chain together. Oh, I messed up the chain already. But yes, you got those beautiful wide sweeps that you can chain together. And you've got this awesome single target damage. And reach. So you really can't go wrong if you're looking for a good, versatile, balanced weapon for him. I'm going to bring up the Tuscarora Spear real quick. The Tuscarora Spear has excellent cleave on its light attacks. You'll go right through enemies and proc your pace strikes. Especially with that one, two, three. So that third light attack, that sweep, that'll get it. If you go in for the heavy attacks, you've got a single lunge and then a nice broad sweep. That will definitely trigger pace strikes. And then you've got this awesome push attack. That's a great sweep to get your pace strikes active too, and ultimately build that power that we were talking about. The only downside to this weapon is it seems to be pretty reliant on headshots to deal with elites, but the headshots are rewarded with a pretty awesome finesse modifier. And for those of you who don't know what a finesse modifier is, it is the modifier you get for headshot damage with all weapons. And I'm going to come back and talk about, I did a video with the one-handed sword a while back in the Drakenfels map, and I found that it actually plays pretty well. And it's got a buff recently to its armor damage on its charge attacks, and its charge attacks are these really simple, clean sweeps. Look at that. Really simple. It's got excellent mobility. I probably wouldn't say it's got great killing power, as, you know, many of you might know, especially if you play the Executioner Sword a lot. You're definitely not going to be the Executioner Sword god. But you've got these awesome light attacks that can sweep through with that headshot damage. And I believe that third light attack got a critical bonus to kind of reward you for getting there for that headshot. And stacked with your already 5% increased critical hit chance. I mean, it synergizes. It just not quite as well as some of the other weapons do. And I think that's all I have to say on the weapons for Kruber. Typically, you're going to want block cost reduction and attack speed. I don't have it on my weapons. My weapons aren't the most meta. I'm building my red stash currently as we speak. And I would say that the thing you're really going to be looking for are things that synergize with your ability to cleave. And if you're going into harder difficulties, you're really going to want to look for a melee weapon that can deal with mixed units, because they're definitely going to appear more frequently as you get toward Cataclysm. And once you're in Cataclysm or in Deeds, you're going to have much more armor in your little meat shake there. And to talk about ranged weapons, there's only two I recommend with this class out of all. And that is the handgun. The handgun can hit these really important body shot breakpoints. And for those of you who don't know, breakpoints is is when you have enough power in, like, let's say Chaos and Infantry, Skaven and Armored, to one-shot specials. And the handgun lets you hit that on Cataclysm, the hardest difficulty in the game. And that's when it's really important, I would say. And then I would follow that by saying the repeater handgun's a strong second. It'll take 2 shots, maybe 3, to down any special. And with your high crit chance, you're going, if you proc Scrounger here for that 5% ammo return, you're going to get 2 bullets back. Can you sustain as well as headshotting with the handgun with the conservative shooter trait? Probably not. But on the flip side, you can shoot 2 or 3 shots down a special, put the gun away, and still have like 5 in the clip in case of another emergency, and not have to worry about reloading it right away. And if there's a pack of Plague Monks in, you don't know, your team's trying to give a little bit of ground, you can start whirling this thing up and just put down some pretty sweet damage on them real quick, because chances are you're not the primary special killer, so you don't have to be as stingy with your ammo, I would say, or as careful about keeping track of it. It is definitely your job to make sure you have ammo on hand to help the team, but you're not penny pinching with ammo quite like a bounty hunter might be if they're running, well, pretty much any weapon now. So, yeah, that's my guide to Mercenary Kruber. Necklaces, charms, and trinkets I will be covering in a separate video to cover all 3 of them and talk about things that are beneficial, and from there you can kind of make your own conclusions. I'd say the only thing I can really comment on to help pass the time until then is definitely get some block cost reduction in there, and add extra crit chance. Sure, stamina recovery, absolutely 110%. If you're going for books, grab that curse resistance if you're not confident that you can make sure that you're avoiding hits. And, like always, I have been Handsome Zach. I hope you enjoyed the video. Stay safe, and follow if you want some more Vermin content. Take care.